Alrighty, welcome back to White Dude Does Podcast with Friends that nobody knows. So
Okay.
this is my friend Sam Pogue.
Hello.
Sam, if you want to introduce yourself, what are you
Uh,
doing?
my name's Sam Pogue. I'm a history major with a minor in anthropology at Iowa State. I'm on the esports team. Kind of what I do. I work at Walmart.
Let's go. Let's
So,
go.
hoping to graduate next winter. Looking forward to that.
So you're graduating early, right?
Yeah,
What
I
do
just
you
found that out.
do? You have plans for what are you doing? So you said you're a history major, which is the reason why I want you on here because I love talking about history with you specifically.
Okay.
You're one of my history buffs, so I think
Okay,
that's
I
super
would hope
interesting.
so.
But where but where are you going after this? What do you think you're doing?
I have plans to go to grad school. I hope that right now I'm working with Professor McDonnell of the history department to get my
Shout out.
he's helping me do my independent study, and he's also going to help me get into grad school. I haven't chose where yet. I haven't even started applying, but I'm hoping so. My main thing is Southern history. That's kind of my niche. So Reconstruction, Civil War, kind of around that area, and I'm hoping to get into like Alabama or Georgia.
That would be cool. Yeah.
My classmate right now, Will, he's applying to Georgia. He actually applied today. So good luck, Will. Shout out.
Another shout out, man. At least they're positive name drops instead of negative ones.
Yeah.
So you wanted to get into grad school, and then after that, what does the career path of a historian look like?
So okay, so you can be a historian, right? And
What does that even mean?
to be a historian, you write books, and
Okay.
I like writing as much as the next history guy, but like that's not what I want to do. 'Cause
Yeah.
usually, to be a historian, you need to get first you need to get a doctorate, which I would like to try and get, but they offer specific museum archivist programs in grad schools that you could just do and then get right into the job. But if you want to be a historian, you need to be a college professor, and then you work for the university, and essentially you just teach on the side.
Is-
But you write a book as your main job, and you publish it through the university to give them credit.
So it's like the pyramid scheme of knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
like you learn how to become a historian in college so that you can become a professor to teach others
Yeah.
how to be a historian.
Yeah, that's what they all do. Like a bunch of my professors right now are writing books and articles, and it's under the university's name to give credit to the university.
So you pretty much are just an author that has a guaranteed source of income that's not just hoping that your book sell well.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's actually really cool. It's kind of like research, but for history majors, which for some reason feels so different than science. Because like I'm a psychology major, and the way it's been presented to me is like, okay, once you go, because I want to be a professor, and so it's like once you go and be a professor, you're basically just like a slave, and you're going to work and do lab research while
Yeah.
also kind of teaching.
Yeah, that's what you do as a history major.
Yeah.
You just write.
Which is I don't know why that's funnier. Just to say that you write books. I don't know. History is such a niche thing, and maybe you can educate me on this, but it's like it's weird to imagine. It's kind of what they say about everything, especially with psychology. It's like everything about psychology has already been discovered. You know what I mean? And it's hard to find things, and that's kind of how it feels with history. But
That's so not true.
that's what I'm imagining. It's like
That's so not
I know
true.
that can't be true because
There's like the great thing about history, and it might be the same thing about. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing about psychology. There's like branches, right?
you're like
I keep backing up with the chair, but there's like branches. So right now I'm interested in Southern history, and you ask questions like right now in my independent study we're researching why. Okay, so there's these 1865 race riot insurrections that a bunch of people, 60 counties across 11 states in the South were worried about. White people were freaking out saying the freedmen they're gonna revolt, they're gonna rise up on Christmas Day, and they're gonna come and kill us all. And like there was widespread panic and fear, and like you can see it in their writing and you can see it in all that stuff. But the question that we're trying to figure out is why? You know,
and
like
what happened with that and
well, no, okay, so here's the funny thing. Christmas rolls around and nothing happens. And then they're like, oh well.
so, like, history just forgets that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you can't forget because it adds such like the whole picture. You have to look at the whole picture. Like these people are paranoid and they're just like freaking out, and they're forming militias over nothing.
Yeah.
But
Just
it's
making
like
up stuff.
why? And so you try to narrow down like where it came from, and you like read the letters, and like I'm reading this collection from the Freedmen's Bureau where it just a collection of back and forth between the Freedmen's Bureau, which is like the former slaves like government representation office. So like the former slave would go to the Freedmen's Bureau and ask, hey, I need like 40 acres and a mule. and like you need to help me get there, or like they would be the buffer for contracts for shareholders.
And so you watched this. Were they the ones that kind of helped spread this widespread panic, or
No,
like were they just one of many?
it was just like it's just so crazy. I don't know. The Freedmen's Bureau is receiving all these complaints saying that these freedmen are going to revolt, and they're like going and sending out agents looking at these former slaves, and they're just congregating for prayer or having a party or just like normal things. But the whites in the town are freaking out, and they're like, "What are you guys on about?" And so they'll send someone out there to investigate it, and then nothing happens. And so my job would be to try and figure out where is the paranoia stemming from.
Yeah, and
What county, what town, who said it, why?
where did this start?
Yeah.
Like, why do people? Well, I mean that it kind of makes sense. You have like this huge group of people that are scared that anything's gonna happen.
60 counties in 11 states. Something is happening.
Yeah,
That they're
yeah.
like they're a general consensus. What I attribute it to almost is like, you remember the end of the Mayan calendar?
Yeah, the 20. I was going to bring up the 2012 thing.
Yeah.
where-
People were freaking out because it's like this common knowledge that this was going to happen, but then nothing happened.
and then this big conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I was just thinking about that. I just
And-
told my parents.
And there's like this whole phenomenon post Civil War where whites will just act like childishly paranoid over nothing, and then they'll form militias, enact violence horribly, and then when they get investigated by the Freedmen's Bureau, they're like, "Well, look, I mean, they were going to revolt and fight after, and go kill us. I mean."
and they're just chilling, having a picnic
Yeah,
together.
it's
or
like,
something.
why? Like, what?
Yeah.
Where did the paranoia stem from? Like, what's the cause? Are they traumatized psychologically from losing the war? Are they worried that the slaves are just going to be angry and come back? Or is it some new age racism that they've developed in their own mind?
Yeah, or is it just like this huge gaslighting scheme where like freed slaves are saying all this stuff and then
That
like
would be
deleting
crazy.
all history of it?
That would be crazy, because that's the problem that we have is you have all these records, right? But then there's like millions of letters missing. You'll have this whole connection of 10 letters. I was reading it earlier today. The whole letter string between this white former plantation owner in Georgia and the Freedmen's Bureau, and there's 10 letters. In the final letter, she writes to the Freedmen's Bureau saying, "My husband is forming a militia with the locals, and we're going to march on this plantation, or like this. I guess it's like a colony, but not really. Like this congregation of freed slaves where they lived on like the outside of town.
Okay, yeah.
And they're like, we're gonna march because we saw them practicing militia riots in caves."
What?
It's like, where did you get that idea? And then, but that's the thing though, is that like that's one person, but that's a common misconception. Is they will constantly say, "We saw them practicing in the woods or in caves." Like, why there? Like, where did you get this idea?
So do you think that there was this some big governing body that helped do you think the news at that time, whatever the news was, whether it be like word of mouth or like paper news, was just like inciting stuff like this,
There
or
were
saying that it
certain-
was happening?
There are certain newspapers that are like slave run, like former slave run, where they're more pro-slave, and then there are like
Hold on. I just looked at the TV screen. Oh, you keep talking.
okay, and then there's obviously like the white run of like former Confederates who are running them. And so yes, there are newspapers out there that are propagating this like paranoia, but there's also the big factor, which is the former rich ruling elite class of the plantations that are working, and that are working with the poor whites and being like, you don't want to be equal with them.
It's like this manipulating an entire group of
Absolutely,
people.
absolutely. And actually, this is what I learned that was crazy recently, was the Irish hated new slaves because plantation owners would hire they would hire Irishmen to do the nastiest jobs so the slaves wouldn't get hurt. So like, for example, in the 1866 race riots in Memphis, where the whites of Memphis revolted against like this prospering southern section of Memphis that was all black owned, because what had happened was, in the post-year wars, there's a huge influx of slaves that moved into Memphis. Memphis in like 1864 was like 1,000 people. Post-war, it was 20,000.
Oh,
They
wow. Okay.
moved in because all the slaves were leaving the plantation and they needed somewhere to go. And they were prospering here. But the Irish ran the government and they hated the former slaves because they had the people that had to do the dirty work. So they incited this violence by saying, "Oh, these people are going to revolt. They're dirty. Look what they did," you know. And then a race riot ensued where people were killed, buildings burned, everything. And then when the Freedmen's Bureau came and they're like, "What happened? Why'd you guys like do this?" They were like, "You know, they were getting too close. They were scaring us."
Yeah, yeah. It's weird. Do you think that there is do you think that there's like it's weird talking about history in this way. Do you think that there's another perspective on this, like that there are pieces missing? Because I believe that what you're saying is the truth, and even if it's not, it's such an interesting perspective to look at it. Like this easily could have happened, and like you see stuff like this happening today, but it's like when it happens today, everyone's like, "Oh, well, that's not what happened because there's this," or like, "Well, this person said," and they're always like spinning the perspective. Do you think that that can exist when it's already happened? Like, do you think your perspective could be different than what actually happened, or
I think
someone else's?
as a history student, they try to teach you to be unbiased as possible. But if you let your preconceived notions completely like form like what you believe, I'm sure you could definitely skew things that have already happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Like for instance, if I still believed in like I don't even know, like preconceived notions from like slavery and the southern elites, and I read what I'm reading now, and it's like the perspective of what I'm reading is saying that the blacks, like the freedmen, didn't do anything and they're being peaceful, and it was the Irish that did it because, you know, of what have already happened. I could be like, well, that's simply not true, because if we looked at with slavery, they're just slow and they're childish and they need the white man to.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I see. So it just kind of depends on the person and like what the time also.
I think that's a problem with history today. Is there's a lot of they tie it with politics, and politics conceives like a lot of
Yeah, and politics have
biases.
completely changed from then and now too.
Yeah.
So it's like you could say that like a certain party did something in the 60s. Are they even remotely close to the party that exists today? No.
No,
No, not at all.
That's funny because you say it, because like the Democratic Party back then and the Republican Party back then flipped.
Yeah, which is what I've heard too.
Yeah, so-
And like the center has become like much more kind of like left from like what is now left, but like the center left used to be like now hard
Yeah,
right.
It's crazy. It's crazy how people always think that Republicans were always the same way that they are now, and Democrats were always the same way. That is not true.
It's not even
That's
close.
not even
The
true at
world
all.
wasn't even the same way. I don't know how they'd be possible for
Ideas, theories, all have come out 200 years later,
Yeah,
and
I
it
was
completely skews how you view the world.
That's the thing. In like psychology, we're learning a bunch of these theories, and like this theory came out in 2012, and you're like, "Whoa, this this theory didn't exist 8 years ago."
Yeah.
And it's like how we think, you know, it's how we operate. That doesn't even make any sense. And I imagine it's the same thing with history, but on a more just like specific level. Like these letters, when were these letters kind of open to you? Like who read these?
That's the interesting thing about modern governments. There are rules to when they can declassify and allow the public to access papers, and we cannot, as historians, access those papers until they say that it's good. And so,
What does that look like?
so recently, so the way that it works is like a paper is written by the government, let's say, and it's stored away. It's top secret, classified. And I think the rule is they have like a lease on it, and every 25 years they can decide to renew it or release it.
Okay, what what about stuff that's not made by the government or like
Even things like that, because like for instance, the Italian government, because I'm reading about Italian fascism right now, and I'm reading a book called Rethinking the History of Italian Fascism that came out this year, and she mentions a lot of newly accessed articles, and the reason that they are newly accessed is because when the fascist government was in power, they collected all these private letters from not even government officials, but like
just from people sending letters
people.
out.
And so they hoarded them all and they stored them away wherever. And it wasn't until now that they released them to the public.
Dude, wait, so history's pay to win?
I mean, kind of.
History's a subscription
It
service.
it all depends on when the government is willing to let go. Like for instance, there's a lot of missing pieces in the like Soviet Cold War era
Oh
parts
yeah,
of
course there are.
the both American and Soviet side because both governments refused to release trivial information to the public because it would probably completely like destroy the perception of both countries
I
from
was
the
gonna say,
publication.
do you ever worry about that? Like, not worry as in like actually worry, but as far as just like a history major goes, like what kind of ramifications does holding information like that have? That sounds horrible.
It depends on how you view it, right? Maybe it's for the better to keep the peace, but at the same time though, like maybe they were doing some crazy stuff. Who knows? Maybe like the Soviets were doing comparable stuff to the Nazis during World War II during the Soviet era to like further humankind, but like they don't want the population to know that right now, especially right now because they're fighting a war.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess if you just release a bunch of stuff, you have a lot of more angry people than.
And then they wouldn't want the United States to be able to see those either because then they'd get the upper hand. We'd be like, see, this is what we've been telling you people. Look how bad they are.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just you have all these people who are already conspiracy theorists,
And that's a problem too.
And then yeah,
conspiracy theories are rooted in history.
and what's funny because it's like you have these documents that are being hidden, and we just assume like, oh, why are they doing that? Like that's so evil that they're hiding these documents. But you literally just told the story about how people in power convinced an entire group of people to hate another group of people who were just chilling.
Yeah.
And so it's like if they could release some of these, I mean, there's the mob mentality of people. Because that was another question that I wanted to ask you. It's just about like the internet and history. How do you think the internet and this kind of goes into it, but how do you think with the government apparently kind of releasing things slowly and making it take longer for history to be out there, and but then also the internet making history out there instantly and infinite, how do you think that's affected you studying history, other people studying history in general? Like,
I would just like to say, first off, that having the internet as a history student to research is a godsend.
Okay.
I had to do a research paper this year, and I was in the archives, and I had to flip through 13 boxes with at least 10 folders each and like 500 papers within and read every single thing. And that, I mean, that is a great experience. But at the same time, though, like, it is so nice to be able to just look up like Civil War documents, blah, 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 blah. And then it pulls it up instantly.
Yeah,
Boom.
you
And
just read it.
if it's like a trustable resource, it'll have the citation for it in any citation you
print it.
want.
Yeah.
You'll be like, oh, I need this in MLA 8. Oh, I need it in Chicago. And it'll just make it, and then you can copy paste it, put it in.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the beautiful thing about it. But history on the internet can be a problem because I could literally go to Twitter and just say whatever I want, and there's going to be a group of people who are just going to be like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
I'll say.
But then there are going to be people like me who are going to be like, well, what's your source? Like, where'd you get it? And then I'll supply a source maybe, and maybe it'll be credible, and maybe it won't be. And that'll be up to the person to decide. So I think the internet is a great thing, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, you know?
Yeah. Well, because it's like you have this podcast right now, and even though I'd consider you trusting, like people are just gonna hear what you say and then spout it off. You know
I
what
could just
mean?
be lying to you right
That's
now.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like that, everything you've told me so far could just be a total like farce. And then
But then I could be like, well, Elijah, let me pull up the 100-page documents that I've
Yeah.
been reading. And I'll literally cite it for you.
that's what I'm hoping you're able to do. It's just like I have blind trust. You know what I mean? And other people are gonna be there and gonna see like aspiring historian on the thumbnail or whatever, and then just like listen to you and just start writing your notes down. You know what I mean?
And that's the difference, because I mean, we've been friends for a while. So there's also already that relationship that we
that's
have
true.
built.
That's
But
true.
a person behind a screen 1,000 miles away from me who's never met me before has every right to be skeptical.
Yeah, and I encourage it, but I think what I'm getting at is some people aren't going to be as skeptical as
And
they need to be.
that is true too.
Because like you talk with confidence, you talk with knowledge, and you're obviously excited to talk about this stuff. But like that could easily just be like fake. You know what I mean?
That's literally what a politician is.
Yeah, I think that's where I was getting.
Not to say that all politicians with charisma and, you know, politicians speak their truth, you know,
Yep.
what they believe. And
Yep.
with charisma, I mean, if you have charisma, you could literally do anything.
That's exactly what we were literally talking about that like a
Yeah.
week or so ago, to where it's like you know, a lot of people, because you got roasted for working at Walmart and being a history major, and
Yeah,
then
it's
it's like
like
if you have charisma, you can work anywhere you want.
exactly.
Like it's just that's a really just
And
like the biggest
you
factor.
can read literally any biography of any leader. It could be a good one or a bad one. And you will read how they would go to like some meeting, like of their government body, and they would purposely stand up and be like, "Well, I believe this and I think we should do." And people are just going to boom, draw to that and be like, this guy knows what he's talking
Because
about."
whoa, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, exactly. And he could be lying, but at the same time though, at least he's like confident in spitting he's spitting his truth.
Yeah, yeah. And then with like that's kind of one of the things I was getting at with the internet. It's that you can kind of sense you can lack that charisma and still say those same things, and people will just apply that charisma to what you're saying, even if it doesn't have it. So like you could say something historical online, and then people are just going to apply charisma to it, even if you have none.
Yeah.
And so now you're kind of like taking out one of the skill ceilings for just spouting history or garbage, just like whichever or. And so I don't know, it kind of removes a lot of the self-checking, because a lot of people just want to get the information. They don't want to
I know.
read into it, which is with looking at or just hearing you talk about 13-page paper essays and like reading a biblical sized book. And,
Dude,
like,
you have no idea. I would have loved to have just been able to just not read every single page. But you know, to get to the good stuff, you got to read about how their car broke down and they broke their toe the other day. You know, the most mundane stuff to get to the gold.
yeah.
Because it makes the journey to getting to the good information all worth it.
That's what I've been thinking. I've been journaling every single day for the last 3 years now on my phone.
wow.
And like it's getting to the point where some days I'll talk to a potential viewer as, you know, when I'm dead and someone's reading this as like a historical thing. But then I think in a world full of technology, this journal means nothing. And it's like I like write these things and I'm talking about the most mundane things, and I'll put one gold nugget of something like really inspirational or really funny. And it's like in the sea of content right now, that means nothing. And I'd imagine
I
that's
mean,
kind of what it's
you
like.
might think it means nothing, but that's what people were thinking back 200 years when they were writing stuff. That's what Sumerians were thinking about when they were writing cuneiform sales tablets. You know, it doesn't mean anything to them, but to me now, I'm like, wow, this is a great example of the evolution of literary like writing in humankind.
Wow! Thank you for making me. Thank you for making the speck of dust that is me feel significant.
That's
in
the
the
great
sea of.
that is the great thing about history. You can look at someone's Bible or not someone's journal, and it could just be nothing. But then you could look. It's a view into the daily life of what it was like to live back then.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things. Sorry, there's something. I had two things, and okay, but that's one of the things that my brother and I were talking about, Jaden. We were talking about the importance of high school, and how you can kind of worm every subject into being something important that you should be learning. Because a lot of people are just like, high school sucks, and it's because you suck at it. That's really what
I
it
hate
is.
those kind of people.
Yeah, it's like no, it's because
When am I ever gonna use this?
That's exactly it's when I'm gonna use it. So we went through every single subject and put like here's the real world application of exactly why you're learning this. And then history, I think was the most important one for me personally, because it's like this is your incentive to live a life worth remembering, because it's like you have all these people that you're being taught about. Everyone gets taught about Christopher Columbus. Everyone gets taught about George Washington. So it's like this is your incentive to go out there and get it. Is like you need to know that history is documented. You could be on this. You need to be there and do it.
That's why I think in like if we're all still kicking it 50 years from now, the website, the Wayback Machine, is going to be so incredibly useful.
What is that?
You don't know about the Wayback Machine?
Uh-uh.
Oh man, I think you'd like this. The Wayback Machine is an online archive of website screenshots dating all the way back, I think, to like 2005. And you can go on there and you could look up youtube.com, and you can go to youtube.com in 2007 and search on youtube.com in 2007 and pull up a abandoned channel that would be gone today, but had 100,000 subscribers and it was booming back then.
That is awesome.
And that is why people warn about digital footprint. Because I can look you up now on the Wayback Machine that took a screenshot, and it'll be like, well, I see what you're doing on May 31st, 2020. I also saw what you were looking up as a child on October 8th, 2013.
That is insane.
Yeah. And I think that Wayback Machine is going to be amazing for when we write biographies of the famous people now or like in the future. You know what I'm saying? If I get famous 20 years from now, people can use that to look at what I was doing online today.
Which is, oh, wow. Yeah. You know, I think that because that's kind of one of the things I was asking is what are people going to be looking back on now? So like, is today, do you think today is a historical time?
Every day is a historical time.
See, I don't, the way
you look at it this way. We live in a world right now where the American economy is kind of not at its best. I'm not exactly an economist, so I don't really know. But from my past experience of living, prices are kind of high right now.
Yeah.
There's a literal war where, I don't know if you remember, but earlier last month, there was a stray Ukrainian missile that struck a Polish farmer. And NATO convened to discuss whether they were going to enact an Article 5, which would literally start World War III. And only through intense searching of the site did they find that this missile was from Ukraine. Had it been from Russia, we might not be talking here right now.
Wow.
And people sweep that kind of thing under the rug, but the whole implication of the storyline of humankind, that is such a huge moment.
Yeah.
That's like when the Germans invaded Poland in 1939. That could have been. We're on an alternate timeline that you don't even think about.
We're like,
and also China is becoming like, well, it was booming as an economy, but then we cut off the chip supply. So now we're watching the Chinese economy crumble as well. What does that have for global implications? Yeah. There are also concentration camps in China as well, and there's COVID wards. They're still battling COVID like it's 2020. But it's every day is history, and I think that's what you were saying about how like you got to live it up. Exactly. Yeah. Every day is history. You can't go back and do what you did, like you can't change the past. So that's why you got to like make history today.
Yeah, dude, write that down. That's on your memoir right there.
And that's the importance of history. And that's why I found it so cool, because I would wake up and I would wake up at 6:30 every morning in elementary school to watch the History Channel, because that's when the good shows were on. And, like that shaped me, because, you look at these things and be talking about like the pyramids, and it's just like, these people are doing this 2,000 years ago, and they're making history then. They didn't know it, but when they were building the pyramids, they were like, that's like a huge thing.
They're like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
To them, the slaves that were building were like, I hate this. But now we're like, this is an impressive feat of architecture. Wow.
Wow. I think you hear so much when people talk about history, it's always this negative. They try to put this negative spin on it. But you putting like this positive spin on even something as insane as the war, the possible war going on right now is incredibly refreshing.
It's crazy. People don't even realize like what goes on in a day will be history later in a textbook.
Because I think a lot of people, when they look at today being history as kind of like this buzzword that they think of like, gosh, this sucks so bad, like, and they're trying to use it as like a bad thing. But to hear that it's like, no, these are just like pinnacle moments, and these are observable moments, and I'm very interested to see in 30 years how this will be spun or how this will be looked at, and because now that everyone can communicate with each other so easily, we have so many different voices going on, and I fear that one, I already think everyone thinks that the loud voices are the most common voices. People kind of mix that up, and then I especially don't want the future to think that that's how we were too. So they'll have like the loudest voices who are saying all these things. They're going to look at like news outlets who are communicating these things, but most people don't really agree with what the news is saying nowadays, it feels like. Or maybe that's just because that's the loudest voice in my ear, is that people don't care about it. And so everyone has so many voices going on, and I wonder like how are they going to decide whose voice is the most like most representative of like the world at this moment.
I think, in my opinion, the one voice that should matter, well, it
Is
should be.
Spotlight ISU.
Yeah,
Is,
exactly.
is
I was gonna say,
yeah.
I think the one. Okay, so first off, personal, like your personal choice really matters. What you choose to do and what you choose to view will completely shape who you are. But I think if you're going to look at history, you need to look at which one is the best cited and the best like scholarly, like it was published by a university. For instance, my dad does not believe that universities are accredited.
I was
And
just going to ask about
and
that.
you can't, if someone is of the belief that a university is not accredited anymore because of the politics that are associated with college people, then you can't, I mean, you can't change that. Like, I could not change his opinion, but he'll question everything I say.
And what you got to ask is like, what is the alternative? Who are you going to listen to if
Well,
it's not the university?
I've already told you who he interacts with, but
yeah.
but it's his choice, and I mean, to try and sway someone who's so into their beliefs is really hard. You have to present like some really like
Well,
mind-blowing convincing evidence.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like if if the universities aren't going to be enough, then you're gonna have to look me in my eyes and tell me that Reddit is where you got your history.
That's what I tell him. He tells me like I'll tell him some crazy fact. It's really hard to believe, but it's really cool. And then he'll be like, "Well, did you get that from Reddit?" And then I was like, and he'll say something like, "Well, Reddit's owned by China or something." And I'll be like, "Where do you want me to go?"
Yeah.
If I can't use the internet, which is the tool for modern day knowledge, I can't just go and find a written history of 2022 because 2022 hasn't ended yet.
And
they also
it exists almost primarily on the internet right now.
And the problem with that is we are living in the modern take of 2022, but 30 years from now, there's going to be a revisionist take. And that is the take that we should be looking at because that's the take that has all of the, not like all of the recency bias gone. So they're writing in the future. They didn't experience these events and they have access to way more context, way more information.
And hopefully at that point, there will be an easier way to sift through information, maybe consolidate a million voices into one voice instead of...
It'll be interesting to see how social media evolves as time goes on, but...
You're getting me excited for how history will exist in the future because I'm just trying to think... I've always thought about, especially since I've been journaling for so long, like, how am I going to be represented in the future? And it's like, is my voice going to be one of millions votes casted towards a certain group of people? Like, it's so cool to see.
It's all how it's preserved. I have at my apartment a bookshelf of just random books. But one of them I recently got is my grandfather's. 1874 is when it was published, of arithmetic.
Wow.
It's absolutely beaten, destroyed. The binding is gone. But it's so cool to look at it and think what you're thinking, right? The person who owned this book, and there's notes of students who wrote in there, they were not thinking about how I would end up with this on their bookshelf. But it paints a story because it was preserved. I can now look back at this and think, wow, this is a part of history. This is a part of someone's life. And they spent time looking at this book and they spent time learning from this book, and this shaped their view of the world. So if your journal gets preserved, like if you have kids and you were like, this is a family heirloom, take care of it, your great grandchildren will look back and see what you wrote and be like, this is my grandfather, this is what he did, this is who he was, this is his view of the world. And it'll be completely different from what they are because their world is different from ours now.
Which is, dude, I don't know, I'm just trying to imagine.
And that's why I think book preservation is so important. And that's why I want to work at a museum or an archive.
Okay, so that's the end goal, is museum archivist. Which is so how does that work? Like,
just like, how do you get there? Like, what do you do?
Is it like Pawn Stars, or someone comes in and is like, hey, I have this book, I don't know.
So there's so many parts and pieces that go into a museum and an archive that I don't think people really realize. There's like what I want to be is the curator for a museum, or I want to be like the head archivist in an archive. So a curator, their job is they put together the set pieces, and then they write like the 100-word paragraphs that go with like it, and they organize the museum.
Okay.
But then there's someone in the basement of the museum who is like shopping essentially for artifacts. And their whole job is they look for artifacts, they confirm that what the artifact is listed as is true, and then they'll either bring it to our museum for me to write about, or they'll just leave it there, or they'll just bring it in to preserve it. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that museums, yes, are open to the public for you to view like artifacts and be like knowledge centers, but they're also literal just like bank vaults.
Yeah.
There are millions and millions and millions of artifacts within a museum that will never see the light of day, but they're there for a specific reason.
I actually
that the
have not thought about that.
Like the museum will have the government pull from it. The museum will have universities pull from it and store stuff there.
And like students like you who want to go and look at like specific literal primary sources.
you can write you can sign a bunch of waivers and stuff, and you can pull artifacts from the Des Moines History Museum.
That's awesome.
Government bodies, the Iowa State University has pulled from the Des Moines History Museum.
Imagine you become an archivist, and then you had just spent like a ton of money and time to like get this artifact, preserve it, put it up, and then some kids throw soup on it. Like, did you hear about that?
Well, see, that's the thing. They're all behind glass, thankfully. But oh my goodness. And I hate hearing that. I hate, like, there was a time, I don't remember if it was this year or a few years ago, but there was people doing book burnings.
Whoa.
Did you hear about this in Texas? There was there's a bunch of mega churches burning non-Christian books.
Wow.
And I'm not talking just like one that was printed 20 years ago. I'm talking stuff that's like from the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. And it doesn't agree with what they believe, so they burn it. And I'm like, you guys are that... If anything is scary, that is scary.
Yep. Well, I mean, and you hear about these things there have to be cyber book burnings, metaphorically, like every single day, of things online being purged or deleted.
That's true too. And that's why a lot of teachers shit on Wikipedia. They will say it's not trusted because people can edit it. While that might be true, what a lot of people don't realize is that you can't just make an account and edit Wikipedia. There's like certain steps and certain articles that you can't touch. And Wikipedia is the single biggest database for human knowledge to ever exist.
It's actually just like every encyclopedia.
And the fact that people discredit it, and it's so well put together, and you don't have to pay. That's the big thing. And it's completely free. Yeah. That's the big thing. I pay money out of my pocket to go to this university to get access to databases that would charge me otherwise hundreds of dollars a year.
Maybe that's why the schooling system says that Wikipedia isn't good, because then they wouldn't be able to make money off people going there to learn.
It might be, but at the same time, though, you can't, just because someone can edit it doesn't mean that you can't like trust it. You have to read between the lines and kind of.
And everything is hyperlinked and connected together, and I'm pretty sure most of it's annotated with everything organized.
There's endnotes on it. It's not like those. If you can remember a time back in like 2007 when we were just starting school, those like single page, you don't scroll down, and it had like the crusty JPEG all kind of copied and pasted all along the background of like a single paragraph of like those websites that would have like information on them. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
I wasn't a nerd in 2007. Dude. I was 5.
I'm not saying that like we were looking at them, but they originally.
But they existed.
They existed. And they're like the sites from like the early 2000s and the 90s where it's like, they're not end-noted. There's no sources page.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think I understand what you were saying. I thought you were talking about an end note that looked like that. No, you're talking about a website.
It's like what a Weebly is now, but before Weebly.
Yeah.
And it's just like Wikipedia is such a godsend that people take for granted that
It's almost frustrating.
You don't even realize how integrated Wikipedia is into search engines. When you look stuff up and it'll just pull up the text, a paragraph of like stuff that
all
is from
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia that Google is pulling from.
So many of my online tests have been done by Wikipedia. Like by doing that, like just copy paste the question box and then it's answered almost directly by some Wikipedia article or Quizlet or something. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful thing. At the same time though, people take it for granted. And I'm like,
it's kind of one of those things because you have all those people who are saying that like, you know, technology is ruining America, but then you have like this other voice that's slightly quieter, but that still is loud. It's saying like, well, it's, you know, all the information is on there for everyone to see, and everyone gets to communicate with each other. And the two sites that I think I've discovered that actually do that is Wikipedia, which is comically pooped on. But like it literally does exactly what everyone says the internet does. But by the internet they mean Wikipedia and Google Scholar. That's it.
Google Scholar is a great resource.
Yeah, those are like the two ones that do that. And then for me, unironically, Discord has been one of the communication ones where like it's specifically you guys being on it all the time. And I just had a conversation with Nakota about it too. You guys just being on Discord all the time and just like doing homework together or like streaming homework or like playing games separately, but just being on the voice channel together and you just hop on and watch it. That is the equivalent of 4 dudes sitting on a couch playing Call of Duty together.
I know.
Like we've evolved from that to that. And people sleep on that a lot.
I take Discord for granted too because I don't even think about it, but I'm literally on there every day for hours. From the time I get off of school to when I go to bed, I'm on there, and we will literally just sit there in silence. But it's the fact that we're there.
You're together, and you know a lot of people, dude. Boomers right now. I know that my dad, not my dad specifically, but dads around the world are like shivering at the idea of us complimenting the idea of us sitting at a screen and saying that we're near our friends, but they just don't get it. Like they actually don't. It is that.
You have to take it with a grain of salt because again, they grew up in an entirely different world. That's everything for them was different.
Most people just assume that we're like lying or over exaggerating or justifying our laziness by saying it's something
that's because they can't comprehend it. In their lifetime, what they grew up believing would completely go against what we're doing now.
And every person who has been wrong has also said the exact same thing that you just said. Oh, they just don't get it. They grew up in a different time, you know what I mean? But they're doing something wrong. But I promise you guys, this is the thing where it's like this is different.
That's the thing. Also, another common thing that I've heard a lot on TikTok or on Reddit is people will say we live in the worst time or like we live in the worst time.
I hate that.
And I'm like, dude, you don't even know how good you got it. Let's break it down your morning, right? I woke up on a nice spring wool mattress under a nice wool blanket in a fully heated electric with electric lights, electric heat, running water, running plumbing, food things in the other room.
After the sun came up.
After the sun came up, I'm in a solid structure. I have a car. You know, I have access to the internet. I have access to literally eating utensils. I have access to a table. I'm reading about.
You're wearing comfortable shoes.
I'm wearing a wool sweater. Like you think about it, we live in the best time, undeniably. You cannot argue that you would rather go live back in ancient Greece, 1300 BC, where you literally lived in a stone box with a clay roof and had a fire.
Yeah,
and you would have to literally suck the bone marrow out of a deer you killed because you wouldn't get enough calories otherwise.
I think the one that I find myself most thankful for is contacts and glasses. I would be dead like within the first 2 years of my life.
You know what might have been happening? Like if you were a Spartan baby, they might have thrown you off a cliff.
I'm not not even. I would have been so defective. I would have been killed or died.
Me too. Yeah, I have food allergies.
Yeah, I was saying.
If they would eggs, and especially nuts, all throughout human history have been a staple of the human diet.
Food, yeah.
Dating back to when we were hunter-gatherers all the way to today, I would not have made it. They would have thought I had like a demon, and they would have prayed to the rain god to get more. Like,
they would have drained your blood to drain out all the sick nut blood.
They would have probably prayed to like like a fertility god in hopes
Yep,
to get
yeah.
more children. Like
Yeah.
we don't have to do that.
A lot of people would say that allergies are more of a modern thing. I don't know the validity
I
of
think they
that.
are. I think they are
I
because
believe that
as
too.
statistically as we've gone, allergies have become more common. But I think that's just because the diet has diversified
I'm
so
thinking
much. If you think about how much our diet has diversified from, like, even when we domesticated plants and animals, I mean, like, before when we were hunter gatherers, right? We're eating nuts and berries and like grasses, like herbivores.
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
we did kill large animals eventually, but that's after we made stone tools. And then we domesticated like rice, beans, tomatoes, corn, you know, all that stuff. And it is proven, if you look at skulls of like ancient humans from like Mesopotamia that were a part of like the first cities and the first people to domesticate wheat. Wheat has, I don't know what it's called, but essentially they were eating more grains and it rotted their teeth more. So then cavities became a problem as cities emerged and foods diversified.
I actually think I've heard that before. It
So
might have been from you, but I don't know.
you
I
just
feel
have
like
to like look at it like we have it so good. They did not have toothpaste. They didn't
Yeah.
have toothbrushes. They would just eat food and then be done. And then when
And
you get
then
a
close their
cavity
mouth,
and an
yeah.
infection, you die.
And they or they'd put like literal wooden teeth in. Like
That's like even way later.
yeah, yeah,
That's like
true.
thousands of years from where I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That was worse, and then it gets worse from there. Like when you go further and further
It's
back.
like you take so many modern amenities for granted. Even this room, like we're in a multi-million-dollar complex made of steel and glass and plaster with high-tech electronics.
That's what I was just telling you about. Like with I love talking about this. A lot of people will complain about college being overpriced. It is overpriced. However,
I can't afford it.
yeah. However, like with the amount of opportunity I have, the problem is I don't have enough
Time.
to consume it all. But if I did, I bet it would be worth tuition. Like if I could do everything, like I mean, just think about it alone.
I'd get 3 degrees.
Yeah, like-
I'd do it all.
All the classes that are offered. This room that I'm using is, I think, the best. I just suck at using it. That's why the quality's not great. But like, this is the best podcast quality that you could get right now. Period.
I mean, without having hundreds of $1,000s to build your own studio.
Yeah, without having our studios and like to be classically trained in how to use like this equipment and like be on the mic. But it's like this is one of many things. The bus system is another insane, like 12 hours a day, every single day, doing routes all around campus that you just get on for free. Like, I mean, think about the electricity from all the buildings that are on until 12 o'clock every single night. Like the amount of staff, janitorial. I mean, like the amount of money that goes into this is not something to laugh at. You know
I know.
what I mean?
You know what's really funny was over Thanksgiving, I was talking to my 13-year-old cousin, and he's in Illinois right now. But he's in 8th grade, and I was like, "What do you want to do, man?" He's like, "I want to be a aerospace engineer." And I started selling him on Iowa State, and I was like, "Dude, aerospace engineers get like their own building, and like you get access to all this crazy stuff, like a VR simulator." Did I ever tell you that I did like a VR simulator?
Yeah, they have one of those.
test?
What was that like?
They put me in a room and in a headset, and then they had me do like simple tasks within the VR. And then
Okay.
they like experiment, and they use the data to like fine tune like hand to like, because I don't know how it works, but it was like they're fine tuning the hand motion to the computer, so that way it's more like 1-to-1 with real life.
Okay,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
moving your stuff.
So just trying to make it more accurate.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
But I was telling him that, and I was telling him, dude, you want to be in a club? You could literally do anything. You could be there's a club for LARPing. There's a club for reading, baking, building a concrete canoe. There's engineers making a rocket car. Like you could do a club about growing plants. There's a bird watching club,
And that's just all provided by ISU.
and some of them are funded.
Yeah, a lot of them are funded.
And like you want to do sports, intramurals, man. Flag football, spike ball, volleyball, baseball, softball.
Yeah,
like rowing.
every single
You could literally spend so much time here on campus and you wouldn't even want to leave.
I know they have a dirt track, like a dirt arena for like barrel and pole racing for like horse girl stuff, and like
Like who-
an entire cross country course. Like the list goes on, and it's like I just scheduled a medical appointment for free that I get to do, where they're just like, yeah, we'll check up on you and see what's going on because I've been having migraines recently, and I'm like, yeah, can you guys come check me up?
And the
like,
amount of services that the university provides, writing academies,
oh yeah, I just talked,
writing
yeah,
writing academies,
Writing,
you have therapist academies,
tutoring, therapy.
tutoring. Oh
Yep.
my god, dude. And it's all students too.
And that's all undergrad. The graduate program is like the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
but graduates are not treated as well.
Yeah, but graduates is the one working these things. Graduates are the ones doing these things for us.
Yeah.
But I mean, still, it's like
people say we don't live in the best time, but you take a lot of things for granted, and I think that's a thing that people should really realize.
And especially with people our age too, where they say like college, like us college students are super oppressed, and it's like, who? Not like I don't know about.
You could argue that there are certain groups on campus that don't necessarily have the same opportunities, I feel like, in minor ways.
Okay, yeah. I'd say that
we are not all equal. However, like, I mean, we are all equal.
whoa.
But there are certain things that just don't happen for certain people.
Yeah, and I think that has less to do with college, like what the university is doing.
Don't say society.
No, I think it's more so personal, like where they come from, how they grew up, what they're like personally, kind of what their temperament is.
That is literally
like,
all it.
It's a lot of just like, I mean, you and I were talking about just like how you could see somebody and like that is the cringiest person I've ever seen, and they're not going to do anything successful. And then like you meet them and you see their family life, and you're like, you know, if I was them, I'd be doing the same thing too. You know what I mean? And it's not to excuse it, but it's like
there's a lot of factors that a lot of people don't account for.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. But to say that as a net, to say that things are one like the worst they've ever been or the hardest they've ever been, or to say that you're getting capitalized on by going to college, I think as a whole is wrong. And even if it were in any sense true, that ideology would do nothing to serve you.
I think what people are saying when they say that this is the hardest time is they're referencing the fact that like buying, it's like economy essentially, right?
So just saying it's expensive.
I went to grocery shopping the other day to buy like ham for sandwiches. Dude, like a regular box of ham is $10.
For deli?
Yeah, and I'm not going to spend that, so I buy bologna, which is like $5.
It's just that is the real travesty. That's probably the hardest.
But that's what people talk about is like rent prices go up, and like I don't want to get into the whole politics of wage gap, whatever, and wages because that's a whole different can of beans to open. But some people have valid points when they say that we need to raise it, but other people make interesting points on why we don't need to. But when people say that it's the worst time to be alive, I think what they're talking about is right now is not the best time because there have been better times in the past, but that doesn't mean it could be better.
yeah. And that doesn't mean that it should diminish what you have now. It should just mean that we can continue trying to grow.
We can improve.
Yeah.
We can get back to how it was.
Saying that it's bad right now or that it's not as good as it could be needs to be a positive statement and not a negative statement.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are using that as a negative statement, and that's kind of what's spreading a lot of hate and kind of what's worsening people's lives, period.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're going to have that opinion, you have to find a way to worm it into a way that like serves you and like benefits you.
Yeah.
Because that's like the big question that I'm trying to ask everybody. Like, what do you use studying history for? So like, how does it serve you in like a professional way, but also as like a personal way? Like, you want to do something that benefits you as a person. And so like, how have you used history? How do you plan on using history? Like, how does it serve you?
Okay, well,
Or
I've kind of already explained how it serves me professionally. I want to preserve for the future.
Yep.
You know, history for me personally is it's a passion, right? So I get enjoyment out of putting work into history. Like I wrote the paper that I gave you, and I spent all semester slaving over that, researching, editing, all that stuff. But I am so proud to print that off and to hand that to friends, family members, faculty. And I'm like, look what I did. Like I put in.
I'm gonna read that whole thing after this, by the way.
I hope you do, and I would love to hear if you have any constructive criticism or feedback. I would love to hear
Absolutely.
it, because then I can add to it. I have a folder of every single piece of paper I've ever written in college, and I go through and I look at it and be like, look at what I've done, and it's
Yeah.
like thick, and it's like I'm proud of this, you know, and I put into this, and now I have happiness that I get out of it from looking at the binder filling, you know.
What you know,
And
now that
I also get happiness from looking at my bookshelf filling from
I'd
like
say
other
from-
books that I've gotten, like, you know, like that's another book saved. I literally grabbed a box. The computer engineering building was clearing out their library, and I just took a box of old programming textbooks, but they're ones from like the 60s, from when like a computer was in a room.
yeah.
And it's like, I will never need to know how to use derived like programming or like statistical stuff or whatever. But like, that's a book saved that we can now look back on and see, look how far we've come.
Yeah, and especially with someone who's able to use it. But with that wording that you just use, I would realize that kind of with what I was saying earlier with trying to consolidate like 1,000 voices into one. With every paper that you write, you are consolidating maybe 15 voices into one. And then someone's going to read your paper and consolidate that voice, which is now 15, which was now 30, which was, you know what I mean?
And that's the beautiful thing.
And that, wow.
Of
that,
history. You know what's crazy? I'm the first person to ever write, as far as I know, on this topic. No one has ever wrote on this topic. They've never published anything.
What is the topic?
Bess and Fred Ferguson, the couple, they lived in Ames. They worked for the university, and they were unique because they had money and education, which allowed them to focus on helping other people. And the way that they helped other people was they wrote articles for farm magazines to reach struggling rural families. And it would be tips on like how to raise chickens better, what you can do to grow a better garden, how you can preserve your vegetables after you pick them, pot pie recipes, you know, stuff like that.
Wow.
And I'm the first person to write on this. And I'm working with, you can get stuff you write published through the university. I recently found out about this.
Yeah.
Students can do it. There's like a whole section in the library. But I want to get this published so that way when people look up Bess and Fred Ferguson in the future, they can reference my paper and they don't have to go through the painstaking research that I went through.
Yep.
And just like how you were saying was every paper I add, someone looks at it and they gain stuff from it.
Mhm.
That is what history is all about. You write now for the people later. I'm writing this paper for a grade now, but in the future, someone is going to use this as a main primary source in their paper that adds on to what I've already written.
Yeah, and if you want, like, if you have integrity when you're writing and you promise that you're telling the truth and you care about what you're writing, it's like, it's an invaluable resource.
Passion is everything when it comes to whatever you work on. You could be a civil engineer, a history major, or even a baker, you know? If you have no passion into what you're putting in, then it's not
It's not going to be
yeah,
good.
it's not worth it.
It's not going to be good. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't care with this podcast specifically. It's like, I don't care if no one watches this. Not even a little. I just love having this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
And it's recorded, and you know, and this is a part of history.
It's history.
Elijah.
It's history.
We can
It's
look back
history.
on this, and someone can look back on this and be like, "This is the early 21st century perspective of a history student."
Yeah, which is so cool. And that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, everything that we're doing in this age of media, it's like it's being recorded, it's being written down.
History is today. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, dude. Yeah. I think we'll probably end it there because I have another person come. Wait. No, actually, we have like 15 minutes. We can keep going.
Hey man, you can't kick me out quite yet.
No. I saw that we're coming on an hour, but yeah, we have like 15 minutes. But with that paper, if you want to send me the Google Doc link, I'll put it in the description so people can read your.
Okay,
People can read
it's
your
on
paper.
Microsoft Word.
Or
and
just
stuff.
give me.
Okay.
I'll try to figure out. I don't know if YouTube will allow me to.
Yeah, I don't
to
know.
plug
Maybe
like that.
you could put like a drop link or something.
Yeah,
but-
or something like that. Something fishy. I'll just I don't know, put it to Wikipedia or something. But I don't know. The stuff that you've been saying about history is, I mean, genuinely inspiring, especially for a lot of people's least favorite subject. is
I don't get the hate.
I-
I hate math.
Yeah.
Math is my least favorite because I suck at it and I just don't get it.
Yep.
You can present it to me and I'll be like, it sounds dumb, but like I say, what's the end goal? When you do like, I did pre-calc my freshman year and I almost failed.
wow.
So
Big boy over
I
here.
I know. A lot of people do that in high school, but I only had to do algebra 2 in high school. So I just didn't have, work that hard. But I'm like looking at all these theories and I'm looking at all these like numbers and I'm like, what? It's not necessarily like, what am I going to use this in? But like, where does it lead me? I do the problem not successfully most of the time. But then what do I like gain?
So the justification that I've used for math, because like I said, I went through each of the subjects and tried to put like a reason why you would do it. And I think math is super important because pretty much all subjects have like this slight idea that if you don't like it, you have to learn how to learn. I think like one of the biggest things that I love preaching is that uncomfortability breeds growth, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to grow if you're comfortable. Yeah. Or if you're not willing to like change. And math is the epitome of that. It's willingly putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation to triumph and do better.
Well, I can see like math is good because it promotes critical thinking,
pattern recognition,
more than like history, right? I mean, like you need critical thinking for doing history in most subjects. But math, there's a certain thing where like there's usually only one route you can take, and you have to see how it all stacks up to get to the answer. And that really kicks me. I just can't, I struggle.
Well, you have a lot of people who are going into jobs where they'll have to learn things, aspects of jobs they don't like, or mundane things, especially since, if you think about all the jobs that are available, we have like 50% of the workforce are doing kind of mindless jobs that they might not like. And they have to learn how to do math-like things that they don't like, that are difficult, that they won't use in real life.
I wouldn't say that they don't serve a purpose. I think every job serves a purpose. Yeah, I wouldn't say you have to have pride in your job.
Yeah. Did I say not serve a purpose, or did I say?
I thought you did, but
I don't know. Maybe I didn't mean not serve a purpose. I meant that it's like it's a job that people would consider not as fulfilling. They wouldn't choose that job. Like they were like, I want to be this when I'm older. They wouldn't choose that job. A lot of more simple jobs.
You gotta take the bad jobs to get to what you want. I work at Walmart now, and it's a great job to have during college because it's not like demanding at all.
No, yeah.
But I literally was in high school. I was a groundskeeper. I was in between. Even in college, I was a construction. I'd work construction. I was a ski instructor. You gotta do the work. Those aren't necessarily bad jobs, but they're very labor intensive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just got to pick and choose, and you got to build up of what. And now my resume looks great because I have all these.
You have a bunch of different jobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming most, if not any, you left like in bad taste or like.
I willingly quit most of them, all of them, in fact.
Oh, okay, yeah, but still, it's not like you got fired or anything. So,
I've never been fired. No.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things where, because any job, no matter what it is, with the right perspective, as naive as it is to think that, like, so what if I'm wrong? Like, with any job, a perspective can make a bad job a good job, or like an unenjoyable job a much better job.
You can say that about anything.
That's what I'm saying. Like
perspective and passion.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, and I think what's frustrating about that ideology, or like trying to defend that ideology, is people will be like, that's stupid, that's naive, what about this, or what about all these obstacles? And it's like, so what? So let's go through this. If I'm wrong, then nothing happens, and if I'm right, then I've lived a better life. What's the risk in thinking that perspective can change and make your life better? There's no risk. I don't think so.
I have some very pessimistic views. I consider myself kind of a pessimist.
That would come as a shock given the rest of this podcast, but continue.
It depends on. It's just like, I would say that I expect the worst, so that way when it happens, it's not as bad.
Yeah, that's
my sister and I. We both acknowledge that we both do that.
Yep.
We both expect the worst. So that way, when it happens, you're like, all right, well, I can tackle this problem because I was already expecting it. Or it doesn't happen, and then the good times are even better.
Yep, and I think that those can coexist. Like having a good perspective on life or having like a positive perspective on life, like this Walmart job serves this purpose. It's good for me. Like it does this. Like having those perspectives or like I can enjoy this or the reason I don't like this is my fault. Like those perspectives are better and you can also say, "Hey, when this goes bad, like I understand that that happens and I don't have the expectation that's going to go perfect." And so I think those can exist at the same time.
That's a problem that also I think a lot of people struggle with is when they get to that, they get that mountain of, oh no, this is bad. A lot of people will crumble because they don't understand how to maybe interpret it or tackle it. But the only thing that I can recommend is that you just got to take it one small footstep at a time. And the great thing about that is that it's not infinite, and you will get to the top, and then you get to the bottom, and now you're over it.
Yeah, you just got to realize that like every person goes through it. Like
I was gonna say,
every person has been through hell and back, and it's like you can take what's dealt to you and be like, "Yep, this is the worst," and then like just crumble and like
That
suck. But it's like somebody else experienced something, maybe worse, maybe less worse, and they got right through it.
that is the human experience. I was reading this. I took a class, English 350, which was rhetorical traditions. We looked at a lot of like uh, theories and like prophets who were just like thinking the deepest thoughts about the human existence and the human planet. And this guy, I forget his name, but he wrote about how imagine if heaven is all perfect, they need like an scapegoat because once you've done everything, you're essentially in your own hell.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of being human is that you are going to experience you need to experience the ones out of 10 to absolutely lavish in the 10 out of 10s.
Or for a 10 out of 10 to exist.
Yeah, if you only have 10 out of 10s, your life when it hits a 1, you're not going to be able to overcome it.
Yeah.
But if you have that mix, and some people have more negative than positive.
Yep.
But once you get those 10s, that's why you gotta have that outlet.
And it's like, no matter how objective it may seem, like your one may be my 3. You know what I mean?
It scales all differently.
And it scales all differently. So it's like, even though what happened to you is like much worse than what happened to me, it doesn't matter because through my perspective, my thing is my worst and I'm going to handle it the same way that you're handling it.
Yeah.
Because it's the worst in my perspective. And so when you look at, other people's lives, it's like, okay, we understand the reality of it. And we're not saying that there's nothing we can do. But what we are saying is that your perspective is holding you back and it can be changed because other people have changed it and overcome what you are struggling with. And so it's like you need to understand that everyone around you is struggling, and if they can get through it, you can get through it, or you can at least try. Like, just try and see what happens. Throw the dice. Who knows? Not me. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of these people use it as an excuse to not try anything, but it's like, come on, man.
And that's why you got to look at history. You got to look at history. We got to preserve history because those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it.
And they've lived through the worst too. You know what I mean? They've lived through things that we can't even imagine, just as we've lived through things that they can't. And it's like, but to turn a blind eye to what other people have gone through in real life is the equivalent to doing it in history. I feel. You know what I mean? You have
to look at all sides.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so interested in Southern history. Because you can look at what they teach you in high school. What they teach you in high school, I've come to learn, barely scratches the surface of what Southern history really is. The amount of books that people have written on both sides, covering both the white and the black, I mean, it paints such a crazy picture that the movie for this, if they were to write a movie about it, it would be absolutely insane. The amount of crazy stories that you can find within Southern history is mind-blowing.
It's an entire catalog.
It's an untapped gold mine for inquisitive people.
Which is, it's super exciting to hear that from you. And I love that that's your niche because you don't hear, I guess, you don't hear about, you'll hear in sciences a lot of people have like a specific, but in history you don't hear about that. Like a lot of people are just historians.
Well,
It seems from like a non-history perspective.
if they're an accredited historian, they will probably have a niche.
Okay.
Their title is historian, but if you ask them like what's their expertise, all of the Iowa State professors have an expertise. Like my professor McDonnell, who is helping me get through grad school, his niche is my niche, so Southern history. But like to Professor Walters, he's a naval war historian,
Okay.
and he teaches war history. You know,
Do you have a second or a third for favorite
okay, so if I
categories
did,
of history?
ooh, well, I'm really interested in fascism as my second, and like totalitarianism. It just blows my mind that fascism works through fear, and that one guy can get a whole country to be like, I'm afraid of you, but I trust you, so I'm gonna hope that you can lead this economy. And in reality, he himself is crumbling from the pressure and makes poor choices that inevitably hurt the people.
I do. Do you think that people's modern definitions and idea of the word fascism is accurate to what it has been in history or even the real definition?
People's ideas or people's definitions of socialism, communism, fascism, capitalism, even, it's all skewed. You will see people online say, I'm a staunch communist, but then they will preach socialist beliefs. You can't, you gotta stop it. You gotta cross
You
the
have to do some studying also, and like
if you are going to announce yourself as a staunch communist, you better be up there with the likes of like Karl Marx and the Soviets, dude. I better hear you saying the same ideas that they have, because as far as like communist societies go, the Russians don't get. I mean, they are the prime example.
Yeah.
There's like socialism definitely mixed in there with like, a bunch of different movements, but God, that thing that's
ain't
corny.
nothing beats the old the old hammer and sickle.
You just gotta look at it. And so when people say like fascism, people say fascism now as like a scare tactic.
Yeah.
This party's fascist, But do you really know? I've like been reading about Benito Mussolini and the Italian fascists. I'm living pretty comfortably for it being a fascist
Yeah,
state.
for me living in a fascist regime.
I don't have to go out and worry if the secret police are going to bust down my door because I don't believe with the fascist party.
Yeah.
It's like,
And I think
fascism, really?
both sides are very guilty of that.
oh, fear mongering. That's
Yeah.
all it is.
It's just it's such a buzzword now, and I think I think it kind of puts it to shame the people who actually lived through fascist regimes and have
my.
actually, and then to say that like
It undermines their experience.
yeah, I mean to say that someone getting canceled on Twitter to call anybody a fascist for that is just bizarre to me.
Dude.
Or like
You
someone passing a law that we don't like and then you just call them a fascist.
You read like any of any of the books I've read or any of the books on Italian fascism, and you read the sections where during the parts where the fascists were fighting the Socialist Party, socialist leaders would literally be giving a press conference out in public, and then fascists would just roll up in armored cars and throw grenades into the crowds of people. Like, I have not. I mean, the closest thing that I have seen to that is the near political assassination of Nancy Pelosi that happened recently, and the January 6th insurrection.
And even that is both of those.
But those are
still
those are like not even close to
minor to
like fascism. It's violence and fear. And I mean, like there's violence today, and fear mongering is very prevalent. But you still live in a capitalist society where I can wake up and go buy a stack of bread and then denounce a party and not get killed for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It just that's what you're saying with just like we live in a time that is completely slept on. So it's like history is slept on.
Absolutely.
Society is slept on.
Absolutely. We need more history majors. Only 2% of Iowa State's at full enrollment are history majors.
Wow. That I'm gonna have the psychology guy up here next, and he's probably gonna share a lower statistic.
I wouldn't doubt that. But people they rule out liberal arts as being insignificant because we're not a chemical engineer developing life-saving cures for cancer.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's all, no matter the size of the cog, you got to fill it in the machine. So
Yeah. And, even if it's not a specific thing, the fact that your interest lies there, that's important. Like, that's all you need. Like, there is interest for it. You're able to express that interest, and it does good. And like I've said, I've had some great conversations on here, but this is easily the most, I think, excitable for the future that I've had on this podcast.
Oh, I'm glad I could give you that
for
perception.
a history major. So, as far as like what I thought you'd bring to the conversation and then what you brought, like, let's get more history majors. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
I would love to come back on and tell you talk more. Especially
absolutely.
after this semester ends.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that because at the end of I said this in like 2 episodes or something like that. At the end of every conversation, I say I want to do a part 2 with them, and I'm just waiting for the person who's like a fan, and then I don't say that at the end, and they get
hard.
Yeah, like, bro, wait, do you not want to do it? So the fact that you said it is
well, I'm a retired More Brothers actor, so I think it's owed. If you'd like to see my work catalog, you can go to More Brothers channel and look up bloopers. That's where the gold lies.
That's where the gold lies, dude. Those are the best, man. Oh my gosh, I've mentioned the More Brothers like 4 times now on this podcast. I'm just gonna keep doing it subtly without saying what it is or what we do. But I think that's gonna be the end of it because I need to get some water. My other guy should be here soon. Your replacement should be here soon.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
So I'm cheating on you with another podcast.
That's fine.
So
I have a life-changing talk with you, and you just keep
yeah. I'm another guy coming here and just make it cool.
I actually have another history major coming.
Yeah, I was saying in case yours didn't shake out, I just decided to put another one.
Yeah, I gotta double back this.
So is there anything you'd like to say to the audience? Any sort of plugging? Any sort of last message?
Don't denounce history. Support local museums, and always stay curious.
Wow, amen. Yep. Alrighty, that'll be all. So thank you guys.
See ya.